Christ so bold, my friends, I hope this finds you well. Here we are, the 5th week of Lent. Wow, it is upon us. Palm Sunday is coming. But today's gospel reading, and of course I'll put it in the description as I always do, but today's gospel reading, it's one of those readings I like to call a Swiss Army reading, in that it's got so much in it. There's a tool for everything in there. Of course, one could argue the whole gospel's like that. Hands on a postcard, kids. But Lazarus, that story of Lazarus, we can look at this story in terms of Jesus conquering death. Absolutely. One of his most important miracles. Oh yes, oh Evans, yes. But it's also a glimpse into Jesus' personal life. You see, Lazarus is his friend. But how did they meet? What made them friends? How did they bond? These are questions that we take away from this reading. And one thing, of course, that this reading does highlight is Jesus' love, Jesus' compassion, Jesus' boundless kindness. And that's what I wanted to look at today, compassion. Did you know that the Latin word, Sunday school time, here we go, ready? Bit of Latin. I know I took Greek at college as well, strange, isn't it? But here we go. Did you know the Latin word compassio, which is the root of our English word compassion, means to suffer with? No, I didn't. I had to go off and Google that. But what an amazing fact. And the thing is, what is compassion? I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? What is compassion if not a chance to feel what others are going through, to pick up their cross a la Simon of Cyrene and walk with them for a little bit? And when we talk about compassion, we have to make the distinction between perceived compassion and true compassion. Perceived compassion is often what we get on social media, and like all things on social media, it's not always the truth. You get hashtag be kind, and then some sort of hate-filled speech in the very next tweet. There it is. True compassion, though. True compassion, that's what we see in those who volunteer to be a companion for the lonely. True compassion is what we see in those who work with very, very little resources and still manage to do amazing things. True compassion is those who worked in the pandemic. True compassion is those who suffered to protect others. True compassion is those who didn't get to say goodbye because they knew it was the safest thing to do, as opposed, of course, to having parties. True compassion is in those who donate to food banks, those who run the food banks, the fuel banks, the safe spaces, the warm spaces, the refuges that exist all over the country for people that have been in abused relationships. True compassion, it's those who protect, those who see the individual in the circumstances, those who do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Now, Jesus himself, in the Gospel of John, I'm going to go a little outside of the readings here. It's actually John 15:12. But in that Gospel reading, Jesus tells us this. He says, "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you." So simple, isn't it? Even in his moments of betrayal, Jesus finds a way to emphasize compassion, kindness, love. Of course, during his ministry, Jesus mentions compassion a lot, and he lives it. But one of the parables he uses, the Good Samaritan, it's one we often learn as kids, isn't it? I remember sitting at school reading about the Good Samaritan and thinking, what a stand-up guy. That's the way it goes. That story, of course, teaches us not to judge a book by its cover. But I would also maintain that that parable shows us what true compassion is. The Samaritan, he had absolutely nothing at all to gain by helping the poor bloke that had been mugged. Nothing at all. And yet he still did it. Why did he do it? Bragging rights. The guy had owed him one. No, he didn't know who he was. He didn't even know if they'd ever see each other again. You know why the Samaritan did it? Because it was the right thing to do. Because it was the compassionate thing to do. But coming back to today's gospel, coming back to the story of Lazarus, Jesus shows us a variety of very human emotions today. And it actually helps. We see that Jesus is grieving. We see he's hurting. We see he's suffering. And this reading absolutely came at the right time. There is a lot to be said for God's timing. Just last week, a friend of mine lost his battle with cancer. And for that reading to come today, it was no accident. God directly speaks to us through the passages of the Bible. And he deliberately did that. He spoke to me through this passage. You see, we see Jesus' human side. We see him grieve. We see him reassure and be the strength that Martha and Mary so very clearly need. Even the disciples, he carries them. In his own pain, he still does it. It's encouraging, it's affirming, and it lets us glimpse the boundless compassion that he holds for us. And of course, as I've mentioned him every week so far, I'm going to do it again. A friend, a mentor, and my former DDO, Tristan Hughes, of course, if you haven't watched any of my other videos, he wrote a Lenten book called Opening Our Lives. And in that, he discusses compassion and how we perceive each other. How Christians are called to view each other as brothers and sisters. He discusses how often labels are given to the other, to those who aren't one of us, those who are not our tribe. Tristan offers the concept of seeing others as our family, and indeed there's a direct quote. It says, "For Christians, there is no opt-out clause in the Bible's invitation to view others as family. Instead, it lies at the very heart of our faith and is fundamental to our radical call to live out the compassionate kingdom." I couldn't have put it better myself. And I often wonder about compassion, not just in terms of our dealings with each other, but with the world around us. Our attitudes to consumerism, to social justice, to food, to animal welfare. These are all issues that are always in the media. Just turn on your television. It won't be long before you see an advert for the RSPCA, for the Dogs Trust, the Donkey Sanctuary, Cats Protection League, NSPCC, Childline, any of the above. A whole host of groups asking for help. I look at these images, I look at these adverts, and I'm keenly reminded that compassion is not just something that we have to have for each other in terms of me and you, but compassion is also something we have to have when dealing with the natural world. It's also something we have to have when dealing with young people, children and teenagers who don't have a voice on the world stage yet. But how does compassion extend to those who feel like they no longer matter? There is an ugly world out there, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. It's cold, it's dark, it's brutal. And that's what it is. How does this apply to the people out there that have fallen down in this world? I've walked that path. I know that pain. I know what it feels like to feel like the whole world has given up on you. And like I said, it's cold. It's brutal, it's dark, it's lonely. Jesus tells us in the gospel today, and I love this line, Jesus says, "Those who walk in the day do not stumble, because they see the light of the world." It's no accident, my friends, that in a different part of the gospel, one of the 7 I am statements, Jesus actually says, "I am the light." Jesus is the light. He guides us on the road we travel, a compassionate and loving guide. And those who feel like the world has forgotten them, those who feel like they just don't matter, Jesus is their guide too. We've just got to show them that. Another story about me. I know I tend to put a lot in here, don't I? But years ago, I worked with young offenders. And I'll always remember one young man. I'll call him Julius. Of course, it's not his real name, but Julius was a violent offender. Julius was the owner of a very explosive temper. He was the owner of a massive, massive chip against the world that resided just there. He had been sent to live with his grandparents because his parents couldn't handle him anymore. So again, it reinforced that sense of he felt like the world had given up on him. And in all honesty, who can blame him at that point? I was almost into about my 2nd or 3rd month on the job. It hadn't been long when Julius came in for his first appointment with me. So I sat there, I'm doing his paperwork, and I'm asking the questions we have to ask him, name, etc., etc. And he was answering rather robotically, if I'm honest with you. And then I said to him, how are things, mate? Jotting something down. And just robotically went, I'm all right. It was that answer, that rehearsed answer, that answer of, look, I don't want to get into it, but I'm all right, leave me alone, yeah? Tick your box, sign your form, let me get out of here. I don't care. I waited a moment and I realised that he was actually used to just giving this answer. So I put my pen down and I said to him, are you? And in that moment, he realised nobody had ever actually asked him that question before. Are you all right? Are you? And we began to talk, and he told me a lot of the problems he's got. And to him, they were mountains, they were Everest, they were Kilimanjaro, they were Mount Fuji, they were massive, massive mountains. And over the course of our meetings, we started to get rapport going, and we started to realise that mountains are just made up of pebbles. Every pebble you take away, however small, diminishes that mountain somewhat. And so this happened, and Julius began to speak more and more over the course of our meetings, and eventually Julius, he finished with us, and he got himself a job, and he went to anger management, and he went out into the world. And I often think about Julius. I don't know how his story panned out. I often think of Julius, and I certainly pray for him. And the point of Julius's story, the point I'm sharing it for today, is that 2 simple words helped that young man change a heck of a lot of things. A young man who felt like society had given up on him. And it wasn't me that did it. It was him and God. I just asked the question. And so my encouragement to you, my brothers and sisters, is this: keep compassion alive within you. See where you can be the Good Samaritan. See when we can further the kingdom with a genuine word, a kind deed, a selfless act, something that can seem so small to us. Like those 2 words. 2-word question. Are you? Take a genuine interest. Let people know that you are there and that you care. Make an impact. God looks upon you and me with boundless compassion. So let's be channels of that compassion. May we be brave enough to welcome that compassion when it comes back to us. Because believe me, brothers and sisters, there are times when you will need it, and there are always times when I need it. My friends, to close, let us, as Jesus was in today's gospel, act in compassion. Let us act in strength. Let us be guided by love. God bless, my friends, and take care.